Rolling. Alrighty then. This is take one, Gabe's News World.
For the last 70 years, the northwest province of Xinjiang has been embroiled in a conflict with the central government of China and has been home to a modern genocide. I'm Gabe Rogers, and this is Laker News International. Before we begin, in order to gain a more thorough understanding of this complicated topic, some context and background is needed. We have two focal points of this story, and they're the Uyghurs, who are the predominant ethnic group of the region of Xinjiang, and the Chinese Communist Party, who is the sole party of the People's Republic of China. The Uyghurs are a Turkic people who have their own culture, have their own language, and practice different beliefs from what you might typically associate when you hear China. And aside from being integrated into the People's Republic in 1949, these people have virtually no cultural connection with the nearly homogenous Han East. The Chinese Communist Party took over mainland China after a bloody civil war with the previous democratic nationalist government in 1949. And I tried to compare China with a more familiar Western nation, but the country that the Communist Party created has no current equivalent in the West. It's an anti-democratic, authoritarian, single-party state that practices a form of totalitarianism that hasn't been seen since the Soviet Union, and they're projected to become the world's largest economy in the coming decades. To say that the Chinese have had a difficult relationship with their ethnic minorities is an understatement. In fact, for its entire existence, the communist state has had nothing but a rocky relationship with them. The Dalai Lama was forced to flee to India in 1959 after an attempted capture by the Chinese military for aiding Tibetan rebels in their struggle for independence, and the Uyghurs are no exception to this trend. Them and other Turkic peoples living in the region have been subject to attempted pacification by Beijing ever since being integrated after the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese government takes any sort of threat to their authority very seriously. For example, and I'm not making this up, all images of Winnie the Pooh are banned nationwide after comparisons were drawn between the cartoon character and the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping. The reason the Chinese government has such an issue with minorities is the same reason as to why the lovable bear from the 100-Acre Woods is blacklisted. They undermine the Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy. The farther you travel from Beijing, the more diverse China becomes. Yes, the East is pretty homogenous and there isn't a ton of variation going on there, but it's easy to see that wherever in China there's the slightest deviation from popular Han society, the Chinese Communist Party takes it as a threat to their authority. In order to quell these active ethnic tensions, Beijing has taken measures to promote the Han lifestyle by endorsing unity under one culture. The Uyghur language is constantly under attack by new national policies, such as requiring the sole use of Mandarin Chinese in education and public science, in addition to pressuring private individuals to give up the Uyghur language in order to show devotion to the Chinese Communist Party. The process of cultural conversion, or Sinicization, has had two main catalysts: the introduction of a larger Han population through state-sponsored migration. This program works in conjunction with another Chinese program to rapidly industrialize the Western provinces, but has also had the convenient side effect of attracting masses of migrants who displace the local population. Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, has a Han population that's growing 10% faster than the native Tibetans. Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang, has had a population that's grown to be 75% Han and 12% Uyghur. Similar trends can be seen all throughout the Western provinces, but gradual assimilation by introducing a new majority isn't the only measure that Beijing is taking, and then this is when the narrative starts to take a turn. It's already been established that the government of China is following in the footsteps of Stalinist and Leninist Soviet Union. And while the current Chinese administration isn't responsible for as many deaths as they were, both of them were built on immense suffering at the hands of their founders. The tradition of suffering was prevalent in one way or another in the Soviet Union for its entire existence. The Republic of China, unsurprisingly, doesn't deviate too far from this example. Hell, even when the Chinese Communist Party seized power at the end of the Civil War, it came at the cost of roughly 4 million innocent civilians. Not combatants, innocent civilians who died from either starvation or disease, and then just another 10 years later, a famine caused by government-mandated collectivization killed another 20 to 30 million people. But we can't know if either of those numbers are accurate or not because the government vehemently censors any evidence that would suggest they could be responsible for such a thing. The point is, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't mind getting its hands dirty, and nowhere else is this clearer in Xinjiang. In an attempt to speed up the Sinicization process, the Uyghur and other people of Turkic backgrounds have been forced into mass detention camps in order to uproot and destroy their way of life. Beijing will have absolutely no mercy for those who do not fall in line. You may think that language is a little harsh. Yeah, me too, but that's exactly what a 400-page document from the Chinese Communist Party that was leaked to the New York Times says. And this isn't some sort of rogue, racist provincial official. No, this comes straight from the top of the party in Beijing. According to the United Nations, China has put over 1 million minorities into concentration camps. And according to the definition provided by the UN, this is a textbook genocide. The party has been claiming that Islamic extremism has been a huge problem in the province for years, which I'll admit has some validity to it. Al-Qaeda has been operating in Xinjiang ever since 2001. However, according to official Chinese publications, 13,000 terrorists have been detained by the government since 2014. And with the country's history of distorting the numbers in their favor, I'm not exactly buying that the number is anywhere close to that. It's a really hard sell that there's been an army equivalent to that of Ireland just wandering around the desert undisturbed and unnoticed until 2014, until somebody just so happened to stumble upon them. There's no way that either A, they really did arrest 13,000 terrorists, or B, not all of them were terrorists. And this was just an excuse to detain and re-educate more of Xinjiang. So what's happening in Xinjiang is objectively terrible, but these atrocities haven't gone unnoticed, right? Well, no, they haven't, not by a long shot, but is anything being done by the international community to punish China for this crime against humanity? Well, sort of. Back in July, 22 nations signed a letter condemning and requesting further investigation of Xinjiang by the United Nations, which is better than nothing. It certainly gets the ball rolling, but don't get your hopes up, because 54 other nations came to the defense of China in a letter that commended the nation for having the camps. Having 22 nations on board is great. It's certainly better than zero, but keep in mind, the UN has no inherent authority to police its own policies. That's up to the member nations, and there isn't silence on that front either. The United States Senate passed the Uyghur Act of 2019, which would impose sanctions and restrict exports to China. But it needs to be reapproved due to revisions made by the House of Representatives, working to be sent to President Trump for approval or veto. But political analysts are speculating that this, as well as the now American-led coalition in the UN, is just a bargaining chip in the larger US-China trade war. And that's what this whole what's being done issue boils down to. It's money. Remember earlier how I said that some predict China will become the world's largest economy in the coming decades? Well, with all that money that China's been hoarding, they spent it buying allies through foreign infrastructure projects and low-interest loans. China sees the opportunities in the rapid urbanization across Africa. The continent is predicted to become a $5 trillion economy in 2025, and the Chinese have decided to bankroll this development. $200 billion are invested into Africa by the Chinese every year, and there are over 10,000 Chinese firms that operate on the continent right now. In essence, the Chinese have bought their allies through this neo-colonialist strategy, which explains the seemingly ridiculous amount of support that China seems to have for their actions in Xinjiang. And a decision has to be made on whether or not to adhere to the universally agreed upon human rights or to kowtow to Winnie the Pooh.